Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. So today we're going to talk about the race for the post of Prime Minister in United Kingdom. Now, Conservative Party MPs have voted to send former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Foreign Secretary Liz Truss to the final stage of the party's leadership contest in the race to replace Boris Johnson as the next Prime Minister of United Kingdom. Both Sunak and Truss will now try to convince Conservative Party members to back them at events around the country between 28th of July and 31st of August, and in two televised debates as well on 25th of July and 4th of August. The ballot will close on 2nd of September and the winner will be announced on 5th of September. Now, Sunak was Parliamentary Party's favourite, winning 137 votes to Truss's 113 in the final round. However, early indications suggest that Liz Truss has established commanding lead over Sunak amongst Conservative Party members. Economic issues like taxation, GDP and cost of living, along with immigration, defence and climate change are expected to be the key issues in the runoff between the two final candidates. So today we will take a look at both the candidates, the issues involved as well, and what's the scenario likely to be. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with, we have with us Ms. Elizabeth Braw. She is Resident Fellow of the American Enterprise Institute in London. We also have with us Professor Harshvi Pant. He is the Vice President of Studies and Foreign Policy at ORF, and former Minister Neeraj Srivastava is also joining us. Welcome, all of you, to Sansad Television. I'll begin with you, Elizabeth. Since you're there in London, if you can take us through what's exactly happening right now in terms of, this hotly debated and hotly contested race.
It is indeed a hotly contested race, and now it's down to two. We had more than 10 Conservative MPs initially wanting to become Prime Minister. Now it's down to the two that the members of the Conservative Party now get to choose from. Until now, the people who have been allowed to choose have been the MPs for the Conservative Party. And what we have are two very different characters, even though they have both been part of Boris Johnson's cabinet. Rishi Sunak until just very recently, and Liz Truss is still Foreign Secretary. Liz Truss has been around for a long time. She was a Remainer, then switched very energetically to the pro-Brexit side after Brexit. The Brexit side won in the referendum, so she's seen as really the true Brexit believer. And she has also promised considerable tax cuts. Rishi Sunak, obviously a banker by background, relatively recent member of parliament, and was Chancellor during the pandemic, did quite a good job, raised taxes to make up for the losses that the government had incurred during the pandemic, and is seen as a moderate candidate, more maybe somebody who would appeal to the wider electorate, less than to the Conservative Party. And that's where we are now. The Conservative Party has about 160,000 members who will vote now, as you said, over the coming weeks. But they may have very different opinions than the rest of the country. They are quite likely, they clearly, judging from opinion polls, prefer Liz Truss. But more generally across the country, which is obviously a lot more than 160,000 people, Rishi Sunak is thought to have better chances than Liz Truss. Now it's up to the Conservative Party members whether they go for somebody that they personally like, with whose ideology they agree, or whether they want to choose somebody who has a chance of beating Labour, which is Rishi Sunak's pitch to the members. Okay.
Ambassador Srivastava, I'd like to bring you in here in terms of analysing and trying to understand both these candidates. And as Elizabeth was also referring to, the commentators are also pointing out that the question now is that who amongst these two will be able to appeal to the larger party base of the Conservative Party?
Yes. The interesting thing is that, most observers and analysts are at this point giving Liz Truss a better chance of winning the nomination for PM than Rishi Sunak. And also, it has been reported that Prime Minister Boris Johnson is very actively, he is campaigning for Liz Truss. So we have to see, I've just for the information of your audience, London bookmakers are at this point of time giving Liz Truss a better chance of becoming PM than Rishi Sunak. And I suppose, we cannot totally disregard that also.
Indeed.
So we have to wait and see. 5th of September is still a long way off.
Okay.
And particularly in politics, this such a long period of time can change things, and we can get a better sense of what the people of Britain think and what the members of the Conservative Party think in the coming days.
Okay.
As you know, I mean, this narrowing the field to 2 candidates, this has happened only in the last couple of days. Before that, we were having these repeated elections. So we'll have to wait for some more time for more clarity on this.
Indeed.
On this issue.
Indeed, we will have to wait for a bit more clarity, and it's almost a month-long, campaign battle, which will go on between both the candidates, various events, to televised debates as well. Professor Pant, I'd like to bring you in here, and if you can also make us understand a little better about these 2 candidates who are in the fray now, Rishi Sunak, who was the former Chancellor, and Liz Truss, who is still the Foreign Secretary.
Yes, it's turned out to be these 2 at the very last stage of this process. And I think it ultimately boils down to what Elizabeth was saying earlier, with, who can convince the rank and file of the Conservatives now. This big chunk of audience. So far, only the MPs have voted. And MPs have, voted decisively, at least in favor of Rishi Sunak. They like Rishi Sunak, and I think there's a sense that he should lead. But now the battle has moved to a wider base, party base, and this is a very interesting democratic process where now the base will elect people, or try to elect people whom the base feels represents more truly the values or the interests of the base. The question is that the Conservatives also then have to go into election mode. And I think already, if you look at the numbers, Labour is rising. So the challenge is, what do you prioritize? Do you prioritize a candidate who thinks like you? It is very important in politics. This question is he or she like me? Are the values similar? And I think that on that question, the Conservatives will eventually vote. But there is also a larger question, which I think Sunak is now pointing out, that only Sunak can defeat the Labour, or has the possibility of defeating the Labour Party in polls. So there is a contradiction here, inherent contradiction here in the very structure of the process. That who do you elect? Who do you think is more capable? I mean, both of these candidates also carry the legacy of Boris Johnson. And Boris Johnson at this point is not very popular. But what Boris Johnson is doing is Boris Johnson is not very happy with Sunak for resigning, and because ultimately it was Sunak's resignation that tilted the scales against Johnson. So he certainly has put all his weight behind Liz Truss, and Liz Truss has a lot of supporters from that side of the equation. But clearly, for Conservative Party, and the reason why the Conservative MPs, moved ahead and removed Johnson, because they know that the bigger battle that is coming is the battle for the premiership in general elections. And at the moment, it is not looking very good for the Tories. And unless Tories get their act together, unless they elect a leader who is able to not simply understand the conservative base, which is very important, but also reach out to a wider audience. They are looking at significant losses.
Okay.
So I think that's essentially the question at the moment. And therefore, you see the platforms that the two are creating for themselves. Liz Truss hammering on tax cuts, talking about how important tax cuts are, how the last 20 years of economic policy has not delivered. Sunak talking about responsible economic statecraft. The fact that public finances are important, that we cannot really take any decision irresponsibly for short-term gains.
Indeed.
And I think he's making a case as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So most MPs understand it. The question is whether the rank and file of the Conservative Party will go with this argument. And of course, he's making a broader argument that he will defeat the Labour, or he has a better chance of defeating the Labour, which I think the rank and file will have to listen and think about as they ponder over this question of the next few weeks.
Indeed, and that's going to be really important because, as you pointed out, Professor Pant, the winner will also most likely lead the Conservative Party into the next elections, and that is going to be a very important consideration there. Now, Elizabeth, both these candidates in the final round, that is Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, both of them are very wary of the public image, and they're making all the efforts out there. In fact, Sunak, one statement from the Sunak camp is that he is a Thatcherite, trying to appeal to the core base out there. That is what seems to be the most important concern for both of them right now. Elizabeth?
That's right, and the reality is that even if you are well known in the Westminster Village, meaning the political bubble in Washington, and even if you have managed to get a lot of votes from your fellow MPs, you may not be that well known to the wider public, and so they have to take the show on the road, as it were, now, and convince even people who don't pay close attention to politics. And that's where they have a disadvantage vis-a-vis Boris Johnson, who really was sort of he's a national character. Whether you love him or hate him, everybody knows Boris Johnson. There is not a single other politician in the UK who's referred to by their first name, but he is Boris, and then there is everybody else. So they have to make a convincing case, not just to the party members, but also to the wider country that they are the person who can
that brings one more question, Elizabeth, and then I'm sorry to interrupt, but since you're talking about Boris Johnson's popularity, will that in any likelihood help Liz Truss? Because Boris, as you and Mr. Srivastava and Professor Pant was also pointing out, that Boris is putting all his weight behind Liz Truss. So will that popularity, Boris's popularity, ultimately give a little bit more extra push to Liz Truss's campaign?
I think it will, but we also shouldn't underestimate the disgust among the wider population with certain things that Boris Johnson has done, and most significantly Partygate, which was really such a flagrant violation of people's trust and frankly of common sense, when we all sat at home and didn't interact with anybody outside our households, that he would then not just tolerate but participate in lockdown parties in Number 10. That really sort of got public opinion to move against him, which is why I think also Conservative MPs in the end were felt quite strongly that he had to go. That was just one step too far. So yes, I think among Conservative Party members, Boris Johnson's support will help Liz Truss, but certainly not among the wider population. But the really interesting aspect in this race is how both of these remaining candidates, Sunak and Truss, claim to be the true successor of Margaret Thatcher. Now, Margaret Thatcher has not been Prime Minister for many years, and in fact has been dead for many years. But even so, she is the defining name in British politics, and the person in whose image Conservative politicians want to steep themselves, and whose image they sort of want to reflect vis-a-vis the wider population. And in the case of Liz Truss, it's down to even dressing like Margaret Thatcher. It is a remarkable thing.
Indeed. Both the candidates are obviously trying to cash in on that image aspect there. But coming to the issues, and Mr. Srivastava, as Professor Pant was also referring to, in terms of the public debate, which is all set to begin between these two, contenders, and will go on for almost a month. Economic issues seems to be, the biggest ones, for example, taxation, GDP, cost of living, and apart from economy, it's about defense, climate change as well. Immigration seems to be another bigger one there.
Yes, and when you talk of economic issues, I think one issue, important issue, has been the war in Ukraine, which has affected prices and other economic things, other economic issues in Great Britain. And on Ukraine, Liz Truss has been the public face of the Boris Johnson government. So we have to wait and see how this affects her chances of becoming PM. Now, coming to the question of who's going to lead the Conservative Party in the next general elections, and I think the other speakers, as they've suggested, is that this is only the opening stage. I think the real thing is that who's going to lead the party into the next elections. Well,
Okay.
we will hear in the debate, we'll hear a lot of things. All these issues will be discussed threadbare.
Indeed. Indeed.
But as somebody sitting here in India, I don't know if it is really relevant or not, but how the British public or the British people will see Rishi Sunak as a possible prime minister, because he is of Indian origin, because he is a non-white, and it remains to be seen who will appeal more, to the British people.
Okay, that's a very important one, Ambassador Srivastava. So I'd like to take that to Elizabeth before I go on to Professor Pant. Elizabeth, Sunak being a British citizen of Indian origin, is that something which is likely to go in his favor or not?
I don't think it's either or, which really says something about the integration of the Indian, the role of the Indian community in the UK, that it's seen as completely part of British society in a way that maybe many other ethnic groups are to a lesser extent, but Indians are just so much part of this country. But there was an attempt, quite ugly attempt, earlier this year to sort of to portray Rishi Sunak as somehow less patriotic than others, and the suspicion is that it was briefed by Boris Johnson's team because they wanted to undermine Rishi Sunak when he was doing really well in the polls before Boris Johnson was toppled. But there were sort of briefings to media about Rishi Sunak's wife, her tax affairs. So she was paying. She had something called non-dom status, which means that she was paying taxes in India rather than the UK. And Rishi Sunak himself, it's emerged that he had been having a green card for a long time, meaning permanent residence in the US. So there was this sort of smear campaign against him to make him look less patriotic. And I think that sort of campaign would not have been launched against somebody of just traditional British origin, but it wasn't successful. Look, he's doing very well among his fellow MPs, and any sort of hesitation about his candidacy among the wider Conservative Party membership has more to do with the fact that he's seen as a socialist, which is really quite a strange accusation on the basis of him wanting to refusing at this moment to reduce taxes. Okay.
Two quick questions, Professor Pant, before we bring this to an end. First, of course, what Elizabeth was referring to, that is, Sunak being a British citizen with Indian origins. Is that, according to you, an issue or not at all?
I don't think it is an issue. I think certainly there'll be pockets of in the wider British population that would see politics through a certain lens, which happens in every democracy. But I don't think it's a defining issue at the moment. I think the fact that Boris Johnson actually should be credited for leading one of the most diverse cabinets that we have seen in British history speaks volumes about the way I think Britain has been able to bring in multiculturalism as a central element in its politics. I think many of these issues don't matter anymore.
Okay.
Certainly, there'll be pockets here and there that will resist, and I think there'll be attempts. But you know what Elizabeth was saying earlier, it was a political attempt to derail his leadership. It was and it failed. So I think it shows in some ways that this card is not working and will not work. So,
okay.
What will ultimately decide will be the substantive issues.
Indeed, and those substantive issues is another question which I have for you, Professor Pant. Economic issues, as you earlier referring to, issues like taxation, the cost of living, and GDP growth as well. And let's not forget, the other issues which seem to be of paramount importance to British citizens, and specifically the Conservative Party members. Issues like immigration, defense, and climate change. Both leaders seems to have very different views.
Yes, I think on particularly, I think where the contestation will happen, it seems to me at the moment, is on economic issues, because that's where the defining battle lines are being drawn. Because what Liz Truss will try to do is to show that Sunak, leading the finance ministry, being the Chancellor of the Exchequer, could not really manage economy well, was out of tune with people's aspirations and expectations, and that's where that's a message she'll try to hammer, and she'll try to bring Sunak down, his popularity down, or his credentials down. I think Sunak will keep on hammering his credentials that, look, I managed a very difficult situation. It was a very difficult time. It was a very critical moment in British economic period. There was Brexit, there was COVID, there was, the people's expectations were not in conformity with what the state exchequer could afford. And so I think he will make those arguments. And in the end, I think as you were talking earlier, both are saying that they are Thatcherites. Now, Thatcherite in a way conveys a certain economic philosophy. And I think, therefore, for them, it is important that they continue to relate to the aspirational politics of Margaret Thatcher. And both will do that. But from their own vantage points, the only problem with Sunak that I see is that because he was the Chancellor of Exchequer at a very critical time, there is an opening here for Truss.
Okay.
That, look, he could not match up to people's expectations, and people were suffering, and his economic record therefore is not that great. And I think that's the real if Sunak can defend his record, I think he'll be much better placed. If Truss can carry on this argument to a wider Conservative audience and can hammer this point that, and as she's trying to do, that last 20 years of economic governance have been a failure, then I think she'll be a winner. I think ultimately, it's the economics is stupid, I think.
Okay. Ultimately, it boils down to issues which both the leaders will see discussing amongst themselves in the public domain out there. We'll keep a close watch there on all the developments. Thank you so much, Professor Pant, Elizabeth, and Mr. Srivastava as well for sharing your views and insight with us and our viewers. We'll come back again with a different topic, and we'll also bring you details of the ongoing race for the post of Prime Minister in the United Kingdom as to who will replace Boris Johnson amongst Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. Keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.